saying or writing before current era
is nonsense.
This has been brewing for a very long time, so it's now time to decide exactly what I'm going to be using from this point forwards. I think you're going to be quite surprised at the result. Okay, so I may have rage baited you a little bit into clicking this, but bear with me as I think whichever way you swing, you will like the end result. Because at this point in time, I don't truly know what either of those actually mean, but I feel like this place could be quite important. So I'm going to use this video to learn, because every time I use the terms BC and AD, nobody says anything. But instead, when I use the terms BCE or CE, I feel like I've genuinely insulted thousands of people. And believe me, I've absolutely no intention to do that. So let's step inside here, step inside this journey. And of course, feel free to let me know what you think as we go along. But I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised. Okay, so have a look at this. This is a printout of a wall painting, and it's actually a calendar. I'm not going to try and pronounce its name. I may even have it upside down, whatever. This is the oldest known Roman calendar from the Roman era, of course. Well, it was found in a crypt in 1915 in Italy, and this is a reconstruction, much easier to read. I'll put it on screen now. The months are laid out, the days are marked. You've got religious festivals, legal days, non-legal days, all carefully organised. The Romans absolutely liked a structured year. Time was ordered, regulated and very meaningful. See, in this calendar, it doesn't necessarily contain any numbers with respect to the years. It doesn't say this is the year 10. It very much knows its place in the society and the community, but it doesn't know its place in history. So instead of counting years, Romans anchored time to people and events. The year wasn't 54 BC or BCE. It was the year when these two men were consuls, or during the reign of this ruler. You knew exactly where you were in your monthly sort of cycle, your seasons, that period. History was a remembered, shared experience rather than one that was written down against time itself. And that works until your world grows bigger and all of a sudden you need something new. You need a way to reflect the years after one another for a significant period of time, and that's where our first dating system comes into place. So societies experience time as seasons, rituals and remembered events, but then BC and AD don't naturally follow on from that worldview. They represent change, albeit in two different phases. So where do they come from, and why do they now structure the entire past that we know of? The answer was administration. Numbered years did exist before BC and AD, but always locally. Greeks dated events by officials or Olympiads. Romans named years after their consuls. Elsewhere, time reset with each king. These systems worked until you tried to compare different places or long stretches of time. All of these calendars, well, they faced inwards. They worked very well locally, and that was all that was needed for places like this. Not that it looked like this. But the point being, very soon we're going to have a significant problem, and it's a Christian problem. Easter. Calculating this date required long-term consistency, and that was impossible while communities used different year systems. The church needed a single timeline, a timeline that meant it wouldn't have to keep resetting, and a timeline that could traverse regions. In the 6th century, around 525, a monk whose name I won't try and pronounce proposed a solution. Instead of counting from emperors, he suggested counting from the birth of Christ, Anno Domini, the year of the Lord. Crucially, this system wasn't created to date ancient history. It only counted forwards. There was no BC. Everything earlier was simply before. It's only later, when we see the work of Bede 150 to 200 years later, that the Christian timeline is extended backwards to organise the past. So BC and AD are not the first numbers, not the first numbered years as such, but they are the first to represent an entire time frame across history. Not because they were neutral or universal, but because they were carried by a powerful institution that outlasted kings and emperors. Which means that when we say things like 300 BC, well, we're using a medieval system to file things, useful and effective. Now come and take a look at this. Okay, so just up here on the left is the church organ. It's going to get a bit dark because there's no lights here, so bear with for a second. Now that very organ there Just after World War II, my granddad was asked to play it, just for a couple of free weeks, because the person that normally does so is off, a bit unwell. And he said, well, yeah, I'll give it a go. And he practiced for the time that he had, 24/7, and he became pretty good at it. And, well, when he was 80, 60, 65 years on, he was still playing that organ. Weddings, births, funerals and Sunday services, his entire life. BBC Radio 2 did a funky piece with him and worked out that he'd played over 33,000 hymns. And with that, from very young age, I was brought up into a very Christian family. And if I'm honest, I really didn't like it. I was a bored kid. I wanted to do my things with my mates. I was saying things now that I didn't understand, reciting really weird statements that made me just think, what am I actually saying? I don't mean any of this. And subsequently, in my teens, I was probably already asking questions. I remember reading a quote, I think it was like Carl Sagan, that if the world restarted right now and we evolved again into some kind of species, well, we probably would have religion, but it's highly unlikely it would look exactly the same as what it does today. So I questioned this at the time as a young kid, and I just thought, no, I'm rejecting this. It doesn't mean anything to me whatsoever. Instead, I'm going to just accept logic in my life. But then one day, well, my granddad died and I learned a really valuable lesson. You see, obviously the funeral was held in this church, and well, come and have a look at this. On the day of my granddad's funeral, well, this is quite a fair-sized church, but you couldn't even get in the church yard for people, let alone the church itself. It was absolutely rammed. People came from far and wide, and from that point forward, for me, it was never about the ridiculous ceremonies. It was never about the random made-up words. It was never about the obscure hymns that I had to sing as a kid. It was from that point forward all about the community. Now, I remain non-religious, very much so, but from that day I've kind of got it. I've kind of understood. I'm not naive enough to think that's what a religion was originally there for, but I had this newfound respect and understanding for people in communities like this. So with that in mind, I have questions. Question number one, well, why am I using BCE and CE in the videos sometimes? And question number two, why does it drive some of you lot completely mad? I kind of want to understand that, because at the moment I genuinely don't. So we have the AD system set up. A couple of hundred years later, we have BC added to that to help give us a better time frame. All good so far. But then something truly magical happened. Science, and as science and scholarship expanded into the 1600s and beyond, people increasingly needed a shared way to talk about time that didn't assume a belief, because knowledge was crossing boundaries it hadn't crossed before. And that seems to surprise quite a lot of people. BC and BCE aren't new inventions. Versions of Common Era started appearing in scholarly writing as early as the 16th and 17th centuries. So the dates didn't change, numbers didn't change, only the language around them. We still have AD 2026 and we have CE 2026. BCE and CE wasn't designed to erase this Christianity in any way, shape or form. It was just designed to make the calendar usable in a context where a shared belief couldn't be taken for granted. And that really seems to be the key point here. These terms didn't grow out of activism, they seem to grow out of scholarship. BCE and CE weren't designed in any way, shape or form to take over the AD system in the later BC edition. And here's a really important part. They were just designed to sit alongside it. And here's where things get really interesting, because when we understand that, the question no longer becomes, well, which one of these is correct and which one of these is wrong. The question instead becomes, why do we feel so strongly about the words that surround them? Now we know the history. So I've made a decision. We'll come to it very shortly. Okay, so what do you think now? Should I choose the 16th century of BCE or CE? Should I go back a bit further and choose the 6th and 8th century of the AD and then the BC thereafter? Or maybe, just maybe, I should then choose one from a few hundred years before that, referring to my king and his reign. Or maybe go back a step further and forget them altogether and just talk about seasons, perhaps like we would have done in prehistory. You see, this is key, because here in Britain, we're a really odd bunch. I don't just mean odd, I mean really odd. I measure in centimetres and metres until I play golf, and then I measure in yards, and then I drive and I distance in miles, and then I run and I distance in kilometres, and then I weigh myself in stones and pounds, and then I buy dog food in kilos and I send postage in grams. I buy pints of milk and beer, and I buy paint and fuel in litres. Wine, small or large glass please, but no one asks how many millilitres. Weather is in Celsius. That's a strong, hard rule. Unless it's a heat wave, then all of a sudden we understand Fahrenheit. We measure land in acres and hectares, rooms in square metres, and size and screens in diagonally in inches, because apparently that makes complete sense. And here's the thing, none of that really bothers us whatsoever. We just fit what works at the time. I'm having a cup of tea right now, but I might be having a quarter of a pint or 250 millilitres. We just use which one fits us best. We don't think that our identity on drinking a cup of tea is being taken away because I'm using a slightly different metric system or imperial system to another. It doesn't matter to us at all. We just use which one fits best at the time. That's exactly how I feel about BC, AD, BCE and CE. I started working with archaeologists a few years back, reading their universal language, and for now, for reasons we've covered, well, they use BCE and CE. And if they didn't, well, I guess it's a bit like me going to Spain, going to a bar, ordering a beer, them not understanding what I'm actually requesting, so I just shout a bit louder in English. So what exactly is my decision I've been alluding to throughout this video? Well, I'm going to carry on doing exactly what I do now, which is I'm going to use both. If I'm walking around a churchyard or I'm out in the field next to a long barrow, I'll probably use BC and AD because I probably already have done for quite a while. But when I've got my academic head on and I'm looking through different papers, I'll probably be using BCE and CE just because it slips off of the tongue. And guess what? That's completely okay. I'm not eradicating history or heritage from this small island any more than I would be if I was using BC and AD, because we had a system in place that took over. We just use what best slips off of our tongue at the time. I've been Paul. I'll see you this time next week. Thanks for watching. Wait, I didn't mention BP. I'm not using that. That's just weird.